Hey folks, Jason Duke's Dirt Race Life. In this video, it's all about the footwell. Bias brakes, throttle pedal, stirrups for our heels. You guessed it, it's all feet first. Stick around. I took a piece of plate steel and I clamped to the floor here. And then what I did was while the seat was still in the car, I sat down in the seat and I positioned my feet to try to figure out where the best location and most comfortable for my feet to be to work the pedals was. So what I did was I just spot welded this plate steel on and get in and out of the seat and bent this around until this was exactly where that comfortable spot was. And now I can check it. And so now I know where my shoe was. Well, if I know where my shoe is, now I've got my brake pedal assembly. And you see I've got both my clutch and my master cylinder bolted. I've got a piece of 3/16 plate steel right here. These two are bolted too. It's already been cleaned up and cleaned off. And it's ready to go. So now I can take and I can figure out exactly where on my shoe. And of course I want it on the ball of my foot. It's going to be just a little bit lower because where my heel is going to be is going to be a little below this plate. But I can figure out how to get this in the exact right spot so that I'm comfortably when I'm racing. I've got the heel of my racing shoe in a stirrup here, and I've got the ball of my foot right on my brake pedal. You're at a disadvantage if you're having to float your foot around, and every time you hit a bump on the track or you get jostled, if the heel of your foot and your foot is like up in the air moving around on that brake pedal or on the gas pedal, that's really putting you at a disadvantage. And so that's why I really think it's worth taking the time to make a great setup on your pedals. And so now I can take and I know exactly where I want that brake to be, make sure I've got the clutch where it will work, and make sure it's inside of where my cage is going to be. What I'm going to do is put a tube in here. But it would be way too hard for me to try to bend and make this tube and weld this up and hold this in place. That's where this big piece of plate steel here clamped on temporarily comes in. Because what I did was I cut myself just a piece of steel, and I'm going to make me a temporary prop, and I'm going to weld this to the floor off of a temporary prop. It will be in the correct position while I work out my tubes that's going to hold this securely so that it doesn't torque when I'm pressing on the brake pedal racing and stuff. I'm going to spot this on this plate. This is going to be a temporary spot that I'm going to tear loose. So I'm not going to, just enough to hold it while I work. That's all I'm looking for. I just want to hold that while I'm working. Make sure I got those shoes. Is that where I want it on that pedal? That looks good. And then just want it to be level. No, I'm not looking at that when I'm welding. All right, so got that sitting. It's sitting level, the plate's level, and got my shoes here. Now I still just got it with magnets on the base plate, so I can move the whole thing around if I need to, and I do because I got my shoes sitting up here to where I'm going to be, and it's an inch behind them, so I'm going to slide the whole thing forward and just a little bit over this way, and Yep, that's just what I'm looking for. And then I want to check to make sure that when I build my foot box, my tubing and everything, and you say, well, why are you doing this before you're building all your foot box? I want to make sure that I'm building my foot box to work around my equipment. You get yourself in a mess, you build a foot box, and then you find out like you needed another inch in some direction, or a tube's going right across where these master cylinders were. So you really need to suspend these first in your foot box, because having your geometry right for your body is more important than just like having your foot box like look square or something, or be some perfect size. And that is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna stick the bottom. Now, yeah, that's good. Now we know it's in the right place, and we don't need this plate anymore. We don't need any of that anymore. We got it in the right spot. I want this to be just a straight piece coming down, and it will have to have another piece tied onto it. So I'm going to come in with a tube right here, but when you're pressing on this pedal down here, your foot is acting like your hand on the end of a long wrench. And so if I just had one tube coming down to this plate, and I'm down here on the end of this wrench, what will happen is my brakes will feel spongy, even though I don't have any air in the lines. I have all the air out of the lines, but on the track I would swear I have air in the lines. I'll have this feeling of having a spongy brake. If you have that feeling of having a spongy brake, but yet you're like, but I know I don't have any air in the lines, look and see if when you press hard on your brakes, your entire assembly is able to twist or torque. And if I just got one tube out from it like this, that would be the case. What will happen is I'm going to put my main tube right here to tie it on, and then turn around, and when I build in my foot box, my safety bars across here, I'll come across and I will tie it together. But again, making sure that it's not in conflict with this in any way. Now let's put that tube on. We've got our piece of tubing made here. We're going to put it in place, clean the ends up, put the mouths on it. Got a 45 on this end, or it's close to a 45, I just cut it to fit. Put a couple clamps in place. Important point here, this tube right here, pay attention to where your steering shaft's going to be. Make sure that you're not right in the center of where your steering column is. For me, my steering column is going to come right up through here beside it, and I'm going to have a little bit, maybe a half inch of room here between the steering column and the brake box assembly of this tube. Yep, that looks right. I've welded the tube up solid on both ends and it's cooled off. So I'm going to go ahead and tear out my temporary support strut, and I've unclamped it here. I'm just going to twist that around. That's the reason I just had to where I could twist these welds loose. Let's see if I can. There it goes. Alright. Now before we go to putting the tubes in to enclose my foot box for safety of my feet, I want you to notice where my feet are. My heels are right here at where this main post is, and this foot box is going to extend on out to encapsulate my master cylinders and the backs of them and the lines and everything. That's all going to be in behind my firewall. But as far as from a safety standpoint goes, my feet are going to be right here at where my main cage is. My knees are going to be bent. That's intentional. If I was straight leg, and I could set this up straight leg, but I would set up a master cylinder system where the master cylinders are facing back toward me and the pedals are on the outside firewall. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted to have my knees bent at an angle, the steering wheel kind of in front of my knees there. That's a good setup for me, and so that's why they're like this. But it also gets my legs and my feet back up inside of this main cage right here. The next tube that we're going to put in is some 095 that is going in right here. It's coming off the corner of the cage, coming straight down into the horn. I pulled a string on my down tubes for my cage, and it is in line. So this point for this is in line with my connection point on the front of my cage. It's in line with connection point on the back. I'm creating a straight wall all the way up through this car. This tube right here will be repeated the exact same on the other side, straight in line as well. Let's see, let's measure it right quick. And of course, we were hoping for 45 degrees is what we were hoping for on the plan for this car. But regardless of exactly where it ends up, it has to be, you know, in this horn. I've only got so much room here. It has to hit this point in the tie-in. And we came out at 44 degrees, which is fine. Why was that important to me? Well, if I'm 45 in these two corners right here, that means I'm 90 right here. And so a 90 degree is a right angle. And when you talk about making triangles in your roll cage, everywhere you make a triangle, you create the most rigid, strongest solution is using a triangle. If you have a real long, slow triangle like that, that won't have near the strength that a square triangle will have. And so that's what our target always is. Now, you know, if we're, you know, to make this fit and we're off a little here or there, it's still going to have a tremendous amount of strength. It's still going to be great. But that's what you're shooting for, is that right triangle. We're going to weld this in. We're welded in on our main tube right here. Good, beefy, tied in well. Next tube going in, this is the one that's actually going to be our crush protection. The reason being is my foot is right here. This is at, you know, in close to it. If a car did come in, got behind my left front tire right here, and I took a shot right at an angle, then you're getting fairly close to my feet at that point. You know, you get right up to it. This one is going to go in. I'm going to tie into my main cage here, and I'm going to tie onto my tube here. Now it's going to be a little tricky. The main thing here is we'll just rotate this to join 90 degrees into this tube. So we'll just rotate that to fit. But I want to make sure that I am straight here, and I want to make sure that the outside of this tube here is on that same as the outside of my foot box, that edge. I'm going to have a steel plate that comes up right here. How do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to use a couple of jig pieces temporarily fixed on, and so I'm going to come straight. So that's sitting against my front of my box right there, and I'm going to set that to 90 degrees, and I'm going to clamp it up. All right, so now I know if my tube is hitting on this side of it that I'm in line with the front of my box. Now the other one is I've got to make sure I'm going to continue this plate on out, but I'm going to drop down to just 20 gauge steel right here. Still adds a lot of protection. I'm still going to weld it up solid on the seam and stuff, because it does have, you know, a value as gusseting for all these bars. But I want to make sure that my line there stays straight. I don't want a big change or to have to join or do something. I don't want, for one thing, I want that to be a smooth sheet that dirt's not going to have a big ridge that it catches and builds up on. So we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take a tube and put here and clamp on. The real trick to this is when you get into these weird angles and getting this stuff to fit and trying to like get everything to fit up right and look square and be right, is using like these fixture little jig pieces. Because like what we're going to do is I can lay this tube and I'm just gripping it to this. So now I know that angle's right there. Now I'm not butted all the way back into it yet because I'm going to trim that mouth up. But what it lets me do, I've got it drop down on the angle there, and what I can do is I can mark. I know that the inside of this fixture is the outside of that tube, so if I put that mark in place right there, that's roughly the right angle for it. Now this mark right here is where this will come into contact with this tube. This is 1.5 inch tube. Going around that tube in a 90 degree straight into it, I know to add 1/3 of the diameter of the tube. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch to that mark and cut it off on that angle I marked. Now that angle might not quite be perfect because I was here and I'm going to go there. But it's going to get us close. It's going to get us close enough that we can work on it, we can trim it and everything. And again, you run into this where that it's more important for me to get the good fit up than it is to be perfectly, you know, in line. I want to be in line, don't get me wrong, but we're going to trim it, and if we find that we have to mount back and like the front of this tube needs to drop in another 1/8 of an inch, that's fine. But you get the gist of what we're after here. So let's mark that and cut it off. All right, we've got our tube cut off, about a 1/2 inch long. Now what I'm going to do is I can't actually get it in there. I don't have everything trimmed back. But I'm getting a little closer. I'm going to lay it up on top of my tube here. I'm going to back it up just a little bit. So I'm going to come, since I went up, so I went up 1 inch here, then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to come back, so I'm back up with the tube. The reason I'm doing this is that this is on an angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the alignment of that tube right up through there. So I drew a line on this tube that's the straight line with it. Then I'm going to draw a line on this side, straight line with it. And the reason for that is because those two lines are going to tell me where I need to cut my mouths back to make my tube where I can fit into it. And so that's the next step. Now this is where we talk about getting into really funky mouths. That one is really weird. But using the marks and cutting the first just big slices out of it got me close enough that I could get it in there and kind of figure out where the flat disc is. So now I've got to get this back to sit down in this slot right here. And so what I'm going to do is I am just going to take, and I'm going to take my eye, and I'm going to try to look down through here fairly straight and make my mark for where I think that is. And it's about right there. And this is not going to be like you doing this real fine point. You'd have to take a flat disc and make this real long, gradual, sweeping curve right there. I won't do that. What I'll do is I'll just take a chop saw, I'll get it really close, and then I'll just take and like this flare out on the end where it comes up short, I'll just take a hammer and bend that over and tie it in. You know, don't kill yourself over that, because I don't think you could get something like that actually perfect. So I've cut this really long, thin angle here, and I'm not going to be able to actually just put this in to get that flat part going. So what I'm going to do, I've got it close now, and I'm going to take that loose, and I'm going to leave it up there because I'm going to use it, but now I'm just trying to figure out how much more and where to go. So I rotate that up. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold that in place. And I'm going to take a marker, try to figure out where I need to flap in that bevel on that nose. We're going to put just a little bit more crook up right there. And we're there. You see kind of a weird angle here, and we just had to get out a big 4.5 inch flat disc to get that one down where it needed to be. It cut just a little long. Now, got it where I want it, and I am going to spot it up and weld it up. Let me show y'all what that. So as you can see here, we're just tied in at a 90 into it here on this bar, and then this one is tricky. And I don't know if y'all know, but like when you cut in, when you get into these deep angles like this, a little more voltage will help, especially if you've got a lot of stick-at going on there. I hadn't had a chance to show it, but this is 14 gauge. This is one big piece right here, and I sanded all this. It had some rust on it. I sanded it, slash rusted, so I went ahead and put paint on it because there's nothing else going to be welded on that. Seamed all the way around. I smoothed all the outside of this off because, and I'm going to put glossy paint on this because I don't want to have problems with mud. I want to be able to spray mud off under the car on this, and then dirt will just fall off before I ever get to the feature without me having to fight with it. So I ground all these welds down. I put individual pieces in between right here, welded each one of these seams. One of the reasons for the individual pieces is because I've got this, each one of these pieces is tied in per bend, makes that super strong. When you do that like that. Tedious, pain in the butt. Didn't do a video on it because it would have been hours of just this, not the most exciting content to watch. But the after effects of it, you know, it's just basically trimming a piece of cardboard until you get the piece of cardboard to fit right. And then you just lay a piece of cardboard on a steel, trace it out, and then just put it on there. And what I do is I literally spot weld it to one side and just bend it over. And then just MIG it down. You know, you get into working with this stuff like this, and after a while, it gets where it's not really a big problem. This one right here, I cut just a little bit short. See how it sinks in right there? It's okay. Nothing's going to be perfect. But a piece of 20 gauge steel is going to go through here. So what's next? Well, we're going to put, we've got a down tube. So in other words, if you'll look, set the camera back up here. So we've got our down tubes down through here, all right? And we're going to put a piece of 20 gauge steel right here. We're going to tie into the seam on the frame rail the whole way down through here. And what we're going to do is we're not going to extend this lower bar. We don't need to. But I am going to put a down tube in here. And the down tube is going to act like part of that safety and everything. And what it's going to do is, of course, it stops intrusion in, but also it's going to stop this bar if I do get an intrusion from just folding up, because it's not going to have strength in that direction. And so we're going to tie into it right here with another down tube. And we'll just make the distance, this distance from here to here, we'll just turn around and repeat that and put it right here. There's no point in putting it out on this corner. I just want it right in here. So that tube in next, that's an easy one. We got our next bar here. Simple mouth, angle. Fit about 15 inches out is what it measured out. I set it the same as what it is. Equidistant with the roll cage where it's at. I'm going to put it in place. Set it at 90 degrees. The next part that I want to add is my heel stirrups, and I want to get those in before I've closed this in and put the side on where I can still work with the floor easily. What are heel stirrups? Well, that's what this is right here. This is for your heel to hook into when you're driving for both, your brake and throttle. This is a piece of 3.5 inch diameter 065 tube. It's just thin wall tubing. It was from the scrap pile. I'm not sure what this came from, but I cut a 3-inch long section and then I split it in half and then put an end cap on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out exactly how my heels lay. And one of the reasons that 1.5 inch piece of tubing is across there is I'm actually going to cut these into that tubing and weld them in. And the reason for them, there's a real advantage to these as far as consistency, especially if you get on a track that's got roughness, like you've got some ruts in it, or you're slamming up against a berm or something. If you've got, real heavy traffic and it's a real rough class where you're getting beat and banged on a lot, well, a lot of times the car itself is fine and it can handle it. You got a good setup on the car, you got the right shocks, you got the right springs, you got the right tires. Your car can get beat on pretty good and can stay stuck to the track, but you're moving around in the cockpit. If your feet are moving around on the pedals, that's making you vary on your throttle, that's making you vary on your brake and everything, and it can cause your car, it can cause you to get out of sorts, lose your position on the track, and it's just because that you weren't really able to stay locked in and on that throttle and on that brake right where you need to be. Heel stirrups can help solve that. I started this, I didn't see them anywhere, but I was just having a problem. It had rained and it was really slick and muddy and there was no way for me to get in my Camaro and be able to race it without having just slime and mud on my feet. Really struggling in a race, my feet were all over the place, and that was where I was like, no more. And I came up with that, and once I built these, then I loved them because it always puts my feet in the exact same place. It's like when I get ready to race before the green flag, I get those heels locked into those stirrups. I can press into them, I know right where they are, and I feel like that I get really great throttle control by having my heel locked into an exact spot like that. Makes it more repeatable for me, like to make the same lap the same way. I can brake the same way, I can throttle the same way. So I feel like they're a real advantage. So let's get them put in. I'm sitting in the center. What I'm gonna do is I've got this 1.5 inch tubing right here, and here's where my heel and my foot is gonna be. Here's where my heel and my foot's gonna be. Take a magic marker, and I'm gonna try to kind of get this angle. So from there to there, that cup's gonna be right up against that wall. Yeah. All right, so I've marked these, and then I'm gonna turn around and I'm gonna cut into this 1.5 inch tubing right here, and I'm gonna weld that in. I'm gonna put that one on a little bit of angle. I'm gonna put this one pretty much straight forward. And the bottom of it, I'm gonna take all the way down to the bottom of the floor. I'm gonna sheet this from underneath on the bottom, and I'm gonna take that all the way down to the bottom, and I'm gonna cut this in, I'm gonna weld this in. Right in there, like that. So, let's get that done. First thing I'm gonna do is the brake. I know it's going to be rounded over the top. And it'll be rounded over the bottom here. But I kind of have to just take a leap of faith and make a cut and start dropping it in and then just start whittling it away. There's no right way to do this. So we just kind of have to just cut and go. I don't want to cut any more away than I have to at first. Because if I'm way off, I'm going to have to fix that. Kind of. Let's see how we'll look. This is going to be turned slightly this way. Oh, you know what? We're not far off. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to clamp me a board to the bottom here right quick. Just as a guide. Probably should have grabbed the clamp before I over that. Here we go. Let's throw that up there and we can use that as a guide to make sure we get this in the right place. My plan all along here has been for this to be the bottom down here. And I want these tubes, I want this tube to be above the bottom anyway. For one thing, I want the bottom of the car to be smooth. I don't want to have these ribs under the car. They'll just catch dirt and wear, the fronts of them will just wear down. All the paint will come off of them. They'll just stay rusted and they'll catch debris and stuff. So, I want these inside the car. And the main reason too is because when I'm getting out of the car, this is a great spot for me to just catch my heel on and push and come out of the car quickly. Anything that can help me get out of the car quicker. You never know when you might have a problem. On the track, you need to come out of the car, so I want that to be above it. Let's see. And so that's going to sit just like that. And, all right, I'm going to switch that to a flat disc. Big, aggressive flat disc on here. Got a nice, chunky 40 grit. We can hog some meat off this bad boy. So, I think that's fine. Yeah. Looks good. And I think that angle is about right there. Now, you see how these corners are sticking up? When this is done, I'm going to cut all of that off flush where it's just this bottom little hook piece right here. And that's it. I'm not going to have this big corner up here because all that's going to do is if I get in a violent wreck, all that's going to do is stab into my heel. So when we're going to spot this in temporarily, and I'm just going to put one spot on this. Because I'm going to test and make sure that's right before I cut that in permanently. Okay, let's get this throttle side. We're going to put it in right here. We're going to put this one in. And it's going to sit right down in there. Might be a little bit tougher to cut it out by it being in this corner right here. We'll get it. Let's see where we're at. We're not far. We're not bad. We're not bad at all. I think I'm going to spot it right there. And then we'll climb in the car and have a look and see how that works. All right. that's close enough. Now that's perfect. All right, let's see this one. Same deal. Yeah. Of course, my racing shoes are just leather around my heel. They're just like socks or something on it. Yeah. Yeah. Now I can feel this on my ankle, but again, we're going to cut this top off after we weld everything up. So, yeah, because I'll be sitting here. That's money. That's right. That's right on the ball. The ball of my foot is right in the center of this brake pedal. That you can't get any better than that. You want to be, if you can, you want to set it up so that you're right in that ball of your foot. That's where you're going to get the most control, and then also you're rotating on it. You don't want that brake pedal to be on your toe. You don't have that control there on your toe like you do right there on the ball of your foot. And so that worked out perfect. So I'm going to put a few more spots in them to hold them securely in place. And then I'm going to take a cut-off saw and I'm going to cut them off flush and then MIG it around it. I have already welded these up underneath around the bottom there. Solid. Didn't have any problem. Didn't have too bad. I had a few gaps in a few places. Not real bad. Nothing that I couldn't tell easily. But the next thing I want to do is actually put the foot box in. 3 sides, they're going to come around here. I want them to be steel, but they're not going to come all the way up. I'm going to use 20 gauge steel and I'm going to come up 15 inches with steel. And the reason for that, I want the steel from a safety standpoint, as far as it creates a gusset for the front of my box, you know, out across, and helps to tie all of this together, tie this leg extending out together. It also provides some protection as far as I do have the ends of my feet here, and even though technically where my feet end is at the tail of the transmission where the drive shaft is, but I want this to be all steel. I don't want to go from aluminum to steel, and if the in front of the drive shaft blew apart at the transmission, I wouldn't want the front of that drive shaft to like be able to come through because I had a joint between the aluminum and the steel right there. So I want steel to be down low going all the way around, but I'm only going to come up 15 inches high, put aluminum above it. The reason for that is because like if you're reskinning the car, you're doing a deep dive in the winter maintenance or whatever, I can take these panels off and get real easy access to my brakes and everything if I really want to like disassemble stuff and work on my bias setup, stuff like that. So the tricky piece of steel is this front one, because I got this tube. I want to go around this tube, be able to weld to it and capture it, and that way I can use it as part of the strength. And so I took a piece of cardboard and I've already trimmed this. And so you see, I've trimmed that, and then I turn around and I bent a piece of 20 gauge. That piece of 20 gauge right there, I've just got one 90-degree bend in it. I just literally laid it over the side of the jig, clamped it down and bent it down. No break here, not required for this. But 22 inches both ways, 15 inches tall, transferred in, cut an 1.5 inch hole here with a rip out. I'm gonna bend this and flex it around that. And then there's where it comes around the frame. Probably going to be a little bit of a trick to get it in there to start with. I'll probably have to bend it up, and so we say I may have to whoop on it a little bit, but that's okay. Let me put my gloves on where I don't cut myself. So we're going to get it in, and then after I get it on, then we'll trim the ends as we need to, and I am going to weld it in. So what we're doing. So like I cut that hole and I ripped that seam out from it there. And so what we'll do here is we'll just see if we can't just fix it around it, like that right there. You do have to bend the steel. You have to bend the steel to get it around it, but it'll go. is I'm going to get this bottom lined up all the way across, and I'll put some spot welds in around the bottom, and then I'll turn around and I'll figure out the top, and then we're going to cut this angle back over here. Alright, I got my bottom stitched up. I'm just going to push this up to touch the bar and stitch it in. And you'll notice, see, look where my brake lines are. See how they're below that steel? I'm probably going to cut this back and have that sheet come down where that when I take this top sheet off, I can get to these brake lines. They won't actually be. I'll probably trim that to whatever is the best for, you know, being able to access it is probably how I'll do that. Not too bad to work with. I'm as hot as I can be. I'm 185 inches a minute. 16.7 volts is where this Vulcan OmniPro is. And I'm still having to back off. I'm still on some of this, like running a long lead on the wire, which is, you know, it's killing off some of my amperage when I do that. So it's cooling it down. I probably could stand to turn it down a little bit, but then, you know, like when I'm working down in that bottom against that 14 gauge, I want a little more heat. So, all right, y'all, let's take a close-up look here. All right, so I went ahead and I stitched this box all the way in around the bottom right here, and I went ahead and I've got a little flare out right there. That's where my foot's going to lay up against it, and so it flares out, and my leg's going to be over here beside it. And you see that I went ahead and I solid stitched it all the way. I do consider that somewhat of a safety thing for me. I don't know that you have to have it, but it definitely does add something. Because if you think about it, of course your transmission it's right in here, but your tail shaft is back in here. And if you have the tail of your transmission explode, which can happen, like I'm gonna run a Falcon, I mean, you can blow the aluminum apart. There's things that are spinning at really high speed right in that area, and so the idea of having that steel stitched all together, solid to the floor pan, where that can't rip through, yeah, that doesn't bother me. Of course, I'm going to run drive shaft loops as well, but that's just at one point. So I like the idea of that being solid. There'll be a piece of steel goes all the way back through there solid. As far as weight goes, only up to here. It's not perfectly straight. That's okay. I'm not worried about that. I'll bolt right to it. It'll look great. And let's see, next piece, we're going to run a piece 15-inch metal all the way down through here. We'll tie it on here to our main plate around the driver, and we'll go all the way down through here, and we'll tie onto this front right here. I'll probably curl it in and then cut that and overlap it and stitch it together. So let's get busy. That works real good. I'd curl it just like that if I was brave. But I'm not brave. When you bow it up and in, it creates a gap at the bottom. But I think we can accommodate a little bit of gap. Get our marker. Mark us some little trim spots. We got a trim here. Take that corner out for that weld. Got to take a little bit out right here for that weld. And we got to cut the paint down just a hair. Alright, corn. I got a little wheel right here if I can get around. got that. Do this number right like this. Just like that. I want that to be round because I might have a problem with dirt catching this corner, and I don't want it to be any worse than it does. So the more I can flare this off. Block of wood would help right here. Yep. All right, let's take a look at what we got going on here. So you see I'm coming around and I just wrapped around this corner. It's gonna be a lot of dirt smacking into it right here coming up. And we want this round. I'll smooth those welds off right there. But I wanted it stitched together, not pop riveted too, because of the same deal. If I'm taking a shot in here, all of this steel is going to pull on the bars, and it's going to absorb energy as it does. So it has a structural element to it. I'll solid stitch all of this up. I don't know if I'll solid stitch it all the way across this top right here, but I'll probably go back and put, you know, a lot more welding on it. And that looks good. Now we're working on that gas pedal. Let's review where we're at, and let's talk about this throttle pedal right here. Here are these heel stirrups, and as you can see, they're not straight. I took and figured out remember how my feet were laying, and you see how they're laid in at angles? Let me show you here. I put my racing shoes on because you can see, because the heels are cut to fit racing shoes, not regular shoes. If you get a big piece for a regular shoe with a big heel sticking out, well then you're going to move around in it. And see, I want that to be right in the hole. All right, those are the heel stirrups. And you see how it works. See how my foot here, I'm laying on this brake, and rotate over here and hit my clutch. I don't ever come out of this. So I'm looking for that spot. My natural point is for it to be comfortable on the brake, but I want to be able to get to my clutch. All right, and then you see I'm laid over here, and this wall right here, actually that's a straight bar coming down through here, but you see I put that curl in it, and I curled it, and then it turns back straight right here. Well, my heel is laying into that, and to me it's really important to have a good natural setup for where your feet are, and for them to be in positions like this. It does make a difference. And so now the next thing we want to do is we want to figure out where this throttle pedal is going to go. We're just going to cut a hole through it, and then we're going to drill holes and bolt that into that plate. So right now this is flimsy, but when we tie all this together and tie it into the frame, this will become very rigid. That's going to be a great piece to bolt that into. Where does it go? Well, I'll show you. We're going to take a magic marker, and what I'm looking at is okay, idle. All right, I want what I'm looking for here is my maximum range of my foot that's comfortable, my maximum range that I can do comfortably. Because the wider I make that range back and forth, the more control I have over my throttle. So I want it to be all it can be. And so sitting here, you know, idle, because you think about this, you might be packing the track in, you may have to be idling for a very long period of time. So you don't want to have your foot like floating up in the air or something, trying to barely touch the gas or anything. That's about my comfortable point right there. So I'm going to take a magic marker, and I'm just going to draw a line at the bottom of my foot right there. And then I'm going to turn around, and I'm going to say, where, you know, I'm coming off the turn, I'm accelerating, I'm at full throttle. I don't want my heel up out of the stirrup here. I don't want to be overextended or having to lean my body forward or anything. I want my foot to just be, what is that maximum? And it's about right there. That's about my max. So then I'm going to leave my foot there and draw another line. All right. So now I know exactly where to put my throttle pedal. It's that easy. The next thing we're going to do is figure out the height. I'm just going to take it, it's right across there. That's about right there. And I will mark that. Let's see how good I did here. All right. We got that. Now, next thing is, what angle should this plate be at? Because as we rotate this plate, it changes how this pedal is, because this plate is intentionally not perpendicular to the shaft. That's on it's probably about right there, as if I had to guess. That's a little too much. So let's see. So it's turning the angle of the pedal as I do this. Oh, looky there. A little more. A little more. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out like where the shoe is to where the angle of the pedal should be. On my full throttle, I don't want to be rolled out on this tip of this toe out here. I don't want to be way up here. I want to be on this ball. Let's see, where's full throttle? Full throttle, that's what I said was about. So I'm coming right to the edge of that ball. So that is, that's probably as good as it's going to get, right where I'm at. Angle-wise, looks good right there. So, now that we've got that, so then I'll turn around and I'll say I want one there, and there, and there, and there. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I really like this design. I like this lower 20 gauge foot tub around it here, the way that worked out, the way that my feet, my ankle is right in line with my big main support for my cage here, you know, from a safety standpoint. My heel positions, the way that this worked out with this throttle pedal, that angle is perfectly in line with my foot. I'm super tickled with it. But an important point that I want to make here is that I don't necessarily have a design before I start building. This car, I had some major points laid out on paper with kind of like for this frame, how I want it to be. But like as I get into this stuff, I'm not going to say I'm winging it, but it is an evolution from build to build. And that is typically how it works. So for those of you starting your first car or building a car or something, and that's not something that you normally do, there's no magic bullet here. I don't have some set of blueprints that I'm going by that I know what to cut and I know how to do it. Key for me is experience from the past builds. You do get better as you build. But it's also, I'm thinking about what are the key things that I'm after, and then I'm coming up with a design that meets that. So like for this foot box, I knew I wanted my legs bent. I felt like I was going to get more control over my pedals if I stopped having my legs out straight, move my feet back, and then turn around. And I said, okay, and if I do that correctly, that's going to shorten my box up and get most of my feet and my legs into the main cage here. And it did. And then I was looking at, okay, that's also letting me move weight rearward in the car. So that's another benefit. So I'm thinking about all these things. I don't know exactly where I'm going to put it, but these are these key things I'm looking at. Now I like the heel stirrups, but I had put them in straight in my Camaro, and my feet didn't fit them correctly. So they helped, but my heels could jump out of them. Or if I got out of position in one of them, I might struggle to put my foot back into it right and be racing for a lap or two with my foot not in my heel stirrup. So I knew I could improve how I put them. So I set the shoe in there, got the angle right. I knew I wanted to be on the ball of my feet. So I went through all of this stuff. That is what made the design, not that I had it on paper first. So don't be intimidated by not knowing exactly how you're going to do it. Just think about what are the key things you're after, and then you just work the design out as you go. Spot weld stuff where you can take it back apart if it doesn't look right. There's some work that I'll do. There's another tube like this that's going on the other side, and this bar right here, this brake pedal, right now, this would flex the way it is. So it would have that spongy feeling like air, but it wouldn't be. It would be this tube bending. But just keep in mind, there is a bar that's going to come across here, but I don't know exactly where yet because I have to mock up my engine and transmission and my headers. I've got headers that go over the top, and I have to make sure I don't have a conflict. So yes, this does have to have another support. It will tie together and get another brace piece on it, but it has to come on down the line in this build. I hope y'all like what you're seeing right here. Smash that like button if you do. It makes a difference and helps this to get out to more people to view it. And if you like this build and you're following it through, hit that notification bell. Thank y'all.